We're live. So, hi everyone. It's Jeannie Ewing with my friend Sherry Tavares today. And we're doing take two of When Friendships Change, naming what we feel because of some technical glitchy things. So, Sherry and I was just telling you this afternoon that I thought about this topic because I was writing these essays about my daughter Felicity, and she was sharing some things about when you're a kid and you get into be like an early adolescent and there's all those messy, complicated adolescent friendship issues. And I was realizing that we had entered this new territory, this new social kind of strata where her friendships were something that were different than they used to be. They weren't the innocent, easy, kind of breezy childhood let's just play. It was more like, wait a minute, how come one girl is ignoring me at lunch and then this other girl is talking to me, but then this other girl is telling me she wants to be my friend, but then she never talks to me. So like more nuanced and complex things. And so I thought about that a little bit more. And as you and I were talking, Sherry, off the books or offline, we were kind of talking about how our friendships just kind of evolve or they kind of fade away and how do we navigate that? And so I thought, well, maybe this is kind of a good way to kind of overlap what what do we do about our friendships? How do we handle hard things? How do we deal with when, nothing really major happens, but there's just nothing left in the relationship or maybe we've changed significantly and we're not really showing up or they're not showing up in a way that is helpful anymore. So that was where I thought about this conversation and wanted to see where it would go. But when you and I had a live earlier this week, you said something that was really cool, and I wanted to start with that if that was okay. And you were talking about being on the playground in elementary school. So can you just kind of talk about that first?
Well, I love Jeannie, first of all. And, you know, when she invited me to talk about friendships, you know, the conversation we were having is really how we met. And we met in it's the creators retreat cohort that our dear friend Terry Lee created. And, it's a group of us writers coming together and we kind of consider ourselves, the weird ones, the odd ones, the shy, kind of want to be behind the scenes, but want to be seen, but don't want to be seen. And when we got on a Zoom call, it's kind of like I was saying to Jeannie, it's like going on the playground. You're looking at all the faces on the Zoom call and you're thinking, who would I want to play with? Like who could be my friend? Like when you were, a child on the playground, you're scoping the playground and you're seeing who do I gravitate towards? And I told you when I first saw you on the Zoom call, because Jeannie, she described this to me later that she's shy. So when, you her on the Zoom call, everybody has their face on, everybody's checking each other out. And I immediately thought to myself, yeah, she's probably someone I wouldn't approach on the playground because she looked too serious, So I was looking for someone who was playful and all the things. And what ended up happening is Jeannie has become one of my closest friends, which is that's the irony of it, that she's the girl that I wouldn't have approached on the playground because she looked too serious and unapproachable. And I'm the one that if you smile at me from across the playground, oh, you're the one. You're the one that I'm going to go play with. But usually that's not the case. It's the very person that surprises you the most that becomes the good friend, the dear friend. So it's been a nice, wonderful surprise, Jeannie, just, building our friendship, and I know that we both have had seasons of relationships and friendships, primarily, I feel like women are more susceptible to this,
I
people can,
agree.
but we kind of, I've experienced it over the last few years, friendships that I've had for decades and have just faded away, which were shocking to me. And it has been a very uncomfortable season for me knowing how to navigate that, and the emotions and the feelings that go with that. How do you move through, relationships that have changed? And like what you mentioned, you change or they changed, or when you grow, you realize things about the relationship that maybe you saw, but just weren't in that place to say, yeah, no, this doesn't work for me. You know what I mean? So it's like what you were saying, it's so nuanced.
Yeah. So from the whole playground analogy that you started with, I was always the kid who was painfully shy and I didn't know if I was gonna say something that would hurt someone's feelings by accident, or I didn't wanna get rejected, and so I ended up being like a turtle in my shell, and I remember when I was very, very young, from 1st grade on, people told me throughout my school-age years, all the way through high school, that they thought I was very aloof and that I was unapproachable. Some of them thought I was a snob, because and it really was actually my own insecurities that I was reflecting or radiating to the outside world, and I didn't know that. I didn't realize that by my through my body language and my, lack of self-confidence, that I was actually, like, pushing people away who could have been good friends for me to me, and so I've had to really work on being aware of, I guess, my first impressions. But what I really liked about the creator retreat, Sherry, is that I feel like many of us, if not all of us, are in a place emotionally where we're willing to actually look past that initial awkward, hey, this is my name, introduction. And we're willing to give people a second glance or a second chance. And I think that is important because I just read something not long ago about second chances and about giving people the benefit of the doubt, like maybe they're having a really bad day, or maybe they're exhausted, or maybe they're really distracted, or maybe they're feeling uncomfortable. And just assuming the best of people instead of assuming, oh no, I don't want to be around that person.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy, it's very automatic to kind of get into that mode where we have these, like, reflexive reactions with
Yeah.
people and the impressions that they give us, and a lot of times, their wounds might collide with ours, and we're not necessarily consciously aware of it in the moment, but that's part of why what there's something about that person, what they're giving off that's off-putting to us, and it can feel, like we're resisting that, like we don't really wanna come close to that because of something maybe that happened in the past with somebody else who
Yeah.
hurt. So I just wonder sometimes if that's that. But then when you're talking about where we are now, because you and I are both middle-aged moms, and we both have multiple children. So you have 4 kids, I have 5, and I think that the whole idea or concept of middle age should be part of the conversation on friendship because I do think there are these huge shifts that happen in midlife that's not necessarily like a crisis, but it's something almost like a rediscovery. And it's almost, for me at least, been kind of like a tune up, like getting back in touch with who I really am, not the persona that I portrayed in order to please other people, in order to fulfill the perfectionist in me that got accolades when I was young, but instead to just really honor who I really am and allow myself to be quirky, like you were talking about with the creator retreat, to be sensitive, to be just human, so have a bad day, to vent sometimes, and not to necessarily show up in my friendships in a way where I'm dishonoring that because I think it's easy when we have patterns of relationship that we've adopted for many, many years, maybe decades. It's really hard to undo those patterns. It's really hard to like shift how we show up in those relationships. And then if we continue to show up the way we always have, and it's not honoring who we really are, that's when things can kind of feel prickly, I think, and that's where maybe questioning the relationship and figuring out, do I have a hard conversation with this person? And how do I do that? So what have you been doing to navigate some of the shifting relationships with your friends that you have, Sherry?
Well, I think you really made a great point is that, you're such a different person, midlife. And, you know, that whole we're a lot alike with the people pleasing and, you know, um, I'm the middle child, so I like to, I don't like conflict. I avoided conflict in my friendships. The challenge for me in my younger years was, um, if I felt anything that kind of came up against a wound that I didn't recognize what that was. I wouldn't have been informed enough to know that that was a wound. I would just cut people off. And I definitely was, someone who kept the wall up, and I was a lot like you. People would call me aloof, unapproachable, and I was just very much like, yeah, because I am, kind of protecting my space and figuring things out. But then as I got older, those walls started coming down and you attract, these relationships and these friendships that I had, you know, for a very long time. But I was this person that was very much about making sure I didn't, you know, uh, push up against anything or make sure that they were happy, the people pleasing. If anything went wrong, I always looked at myself as the problem. And as I got older, I really started to make a shift of, you know, things that I would notice and start questioning and asking myself, well, does this align with my values? Does this align with, you know, not questioning so much or doubting so much that I was being critical of them or judgmental of them, but really honoring and going, wait a minute, no, this is uncomfortable. I don't like this. And it wasn't fair to them for me not to speak up and say my truths. And I just started and it was uncomfortable. I just started really saying what I felt, stating what I needed in relationships, in friendships. And, I found too with some friends that eventually fell off was when I stopped showing up the way they were used to. That's when it was, that was it. And then you just realize that was a very painful time for me because, these are people that I talk to a lot, pretty much almost every day. And I think when you grow, it challenges those relationships. What really was it? What was the friendship? What was the foundation? What was it built on?
Mhm.
And but you know what, Jeannie, I am in such a better place. I feel like I recognize my people, if that makes sense. I recognize, um, that, like what you said, those parts of us that don't want to, grizzle. That's my new word, grizzle. It,
That
I
word.
love that word. But the way that you and I communicate. Remember I think when we first started communicating, I think you said something. I cannot remember. But I came back and I remember my response was a surprise to you.
Yes, I remember that too.
Can you
Yeah.
on that? 'Cause
That's funny you mentioned that, Sherry, because I was thinking about that as you were talking. I was thinking about that very first time that things kind of broke open for me, this encounter with you, where I realized, wait a minute, this is like a really healthy, open conversation. And I felt so relieved. So I'll tell you what that was, and then I'll tell you why that felt really different for me. So Sherry and I had initially connected, to those of you who are watching and listening, about her book, her manuscript. And I really love helping to elevate and amplify other writers by giving them a voice and helping them to feel encouraged. And a lot of times I do that by either being like a beta reader where I read their books and then just offer like some feedback based on what they're looking for. Or sometimes I might like offer to share their story or their book or an essay or something on my Substack or maybe like a note, something like that. I really, really love to celebrate other authors. So I had reached out to Sherry and I had offered to read her. middle grade book that she was working on because you had mentioned in the creator retreat that you felt stuck and you were like, I know that it's supposed to be out there. It's time. I really don't have any other reason why I shouldn't get it out. And I just felt like really compelled. I'm like, I'm a good cheerleader. I'm an encouraging person. Like maybe I can help you get past that stuckness. And that was my motivation and what I was thinking. But the way that I worded it, Sherry interpreted it to think that I was say offering like a paid service, like to like I was off my services, but I wanted her to pay me. That's what it was. And so the first voice message that Sherry and I had this encounter, Sherry was like, I really appreciate your offer, but I'm not looking for any kind of coaching or editing services. I've already done that. I was actually really hoping that you and I would just kind of have like a friend to friend, peer to peer type of exchange about my story and my book. And that's when I was like, wow, I really found that refreshing and I appreciated that. And then my response to you was something like, thank you so much for saying that because that's not at all what I was offering. And I wasn't clear about that. So then you also then responded and you said, you know what? I've just had some really bad experiences with thinking that the relationship was a friendship, but then it ended up being more of like a marketing or business kind of relationship and it wasn't clear up front. And then from there, I opened up to you about some experiences I'd had with the same thing, and we really connected over that. And so I think that's a good illustration of how open and honest communication in a friendship, especially right off the bat, really
Right.
set a stronger foundation because then both people know that they can come to each other in a way that is safe and nurturing and sensitive but honest because there is a balance between the two and there is a way to be open and honest and transparent without being like a bulldozer. And I think that because you and I experienced that with each other, it's just opened up a whole network of feeling like we could share other things and ask each other for honest opinions about hard subjects sometimes, or really share about some painful things that we've been through. And I don't know that that's always present from the beginning of friendships, especially when we're younger. So when
Yeah.
I was younger, I ended up being ghosted by a lot of people. And I really never got a resolution to most of those things. And that's a big reason why I value people coming to me even when they have to say something that they think I probably won't want to hear or that's going to be hard for me to hear because I'd rather hear the truth than just have to guess. Like, why did they stop talking to me? What did I do? And what I kind of figured out without having any sort of specific resolution in those kinds of friendships is that my intention with every relationship I ever had when I was younger was go deep and go intense. And like all of my friends, I had to have that level of friendship with
Yeah.
them. That's not something that each one of them were able or willing to do in this
Right.
dynamic with me. And I didn't understand that. I didn't understand that some friends serve different purposes. Like now I have some friends I know I can't really ask them to support me emotionally because they don't know how to do that but they're really fun and I can go out to dinner with them and we can joke and laugh.
Mhm.
These are my book club friends where we can dive into different topics about philosophy and history and gender issues and religion and all kinds of things. But they're not necessarily going to be the people I call at 3 a.m. because we have an emergency. So it's almost like for me at least, it's been learning how to discern the differences in my friendships and valuing each person and each relationship differently. Like allowing some of my friendships to be, okay, I see them maybe 2 or 3 times a year. Or, we check in once a week or whatever, or the level of depth of those relationships and not expecting them to be the same thing to me. Because, obviously, like you were saying, Sherry, we are nuanced and complicated people. And so for me to have assumed that every single relationship would serve the same purpose doesn't really make sense to me now that I'm almost 45 years old. Now I'm like, well, I can appreciate people in my life for whatever they're able to give and receive. And it's not necessarily going to be the same quality or quantity for each one of them.
Well, I think too that that comes with wisdom, because and time and growth and depending on the season that you're in. And because I definitely was that person that was the deep dive. I want to deep dive with everybody. And if you didn't deep dive with me, then I just kind of wrote you off, and you're shallow. And I was, I don't look at myself as a judgmental person, but that's pretty judgmental of me, and I've had to there is one relationship with my sister-in-law, um who, I think she'd be okay for me to say this because we've come full circle. And we used to talk almost every day years ago. And there came a time where we started kind of coming up against each other in terms of where it stopped for her and what I wanted more of. And that was really challenging because, she could only see where she was and I could only see where I was, and we couldn't get past that. And it really that's when the wounds for both of us came out full circle. And it was probably one of the hardest uh, relationship growth that I've ever gone through, that really showed me where my wounds were, that I wanted so much of to get from this person that they couldn't give.
Yeah.
They they
Yeah.
didn't. And I am just so grateful. I'm not going to go all into it, but we have come full circle. And our relationship is so much better and richer than it was because she's done the work. I've done the work.
Have you
And
both talked about it?
yeah, you're able to appreciate, I'm able to love her where she's at, and she's able to love me where I'm at. And I think what you said was key. Not every friendship is going to be it's not all the same because everybody's different. There's the friend that you can kiki with and laugh and all the things. There's the one that you can, I think I could call you at 3 in the morning. I do believe that 100% that I could call and you would just show up and you would be there. And there are some that just cannot, they're just not there yet. And because I'm realizing that I'm not there yet, I
Mm.
can't be things to all people. Um, and I'm okay with that, So, yeah, I really love that you said that there's just different types of relationships. It's funny, my husband says there's the out on the porch people, there's the inside, you let them in the door there, but they stay at the door, at the front door. And he goes, then there's your living room people. And then there's your bedroom people, that's that friend, with the girls, we like, come on in my room, those are the ones, it's kind of that level of comfort or
Intimacy.
relation.
Yeah, it's a good illustration of the different layers of intimacy. And I
Yeah.
think that with friendships or any relationship, there are different personal boundaries that each person has. Like what do they feel safe with? What do they feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah.
And I've personally gotten deeply hurt when people don't want to share things with me because
Mhm.
I really like to support people and I really like to be able to walk with people in the hard things. And so one of the areas of growth I've had to work on and I am still working on is recognizing that it's okay. That's okay if not everybody wants to come to me with their troubles and their woes. That they're allowed to be able to say, "No, I'm not comfortable sharing that," or "I don't really know how to say that, and I don't wanna talk about it," and for me to just respect that. So I really love how your husband uses this metaphor of the house, and actually it's almost like an interior metaphor. Like,
Yeah.
who do we let in and how deep do we let it go? And that's up to each person to decide, but I also think what makes friendships complicated is when we don't have these conversations. And so because often we don't know how, no, we don't know how to do it. We don't know how to initiate the hard conversation. Like maybe one person, like you were saying, Sherry, you wanted to deep dive, somebody else didn't. And that's kind of what I'm saying too. Okay. Well, how do you navigate that in the dynamic? Because if both people can kind of sense that something is not working, like with you and your sister-in-law for a while, then how do you get past that impasse where you're butting heads, but you're not? Like you're not talking about the real issue. And so that's where I wanted to kind of like pivot in this conversation and talk about what are some ways that we can just kind of lay it out in the open in a way that it takes courage and it's a huge risk because we are risking the relationship and we are risking personal rejection. And I don't think that most of us, as women especially, want to do that. We don't
Oh,
want to hurt people's feelings. We
right.
do everything we can to avoid hurting people's feelings. And we also don't, we know that we're going to take it on ourselves and take that responsibility of, okay, it's my fault, like you said in the beginning, it's my fault that something's going wrong in the relationship. And so how do we actually initiate hard conversations and then sit with that in conversation and decide together how do we want to move forward in our relationship? So, I don't know, do you have any ideas or anything that you've experienced that you could share that works?
You know, that's such a, I feel like I wish it was a one size fits all. I just feel like, you know, there's parts of me that I think I've gotten to a point in my life, I can only speak for myself, where I'm honoring I'm honoring my voice, and I'm trusting that those who can hear it and respect it will respond in a way that will bring us closer together. And the perfect example was, you know, you and I, when we, that whole manuscript thing, I was really is like, oh my God, Jeannie's amazing. And, you know, I'm so excited that she's so interested and so on and so on. And then when it when it felt like to me, when those fears came up of what I was had experienced before, oh, this is a transactional relationship. Oh, she's coming through the back door. Oh, there's an agenda. This
Mhm.
isn't sincere. And I had to start to say, are you going to say something this time? Or are you just going to, like how you've been treated, ghost her? We live in such a cancel culture. Everybody just cuts you off. You said something wrong. You did. Nobody wants to hear it. It's just you are written off. And I do not, I am not in that train. I'm sorry.
Same.
So I felt like, okay, this girl, she's worthy of me being honest, and I'm worthy of having and of my voice and stating my truth. But I can say it in a way that honors both of us and respects, and respects that maybe I'm hearing her wrong, you know? And so when I said it and it was met with such a response from you. So I, I I was like, wow, this I love her. Like you were just like, oh my God, thank you so much. I am so glad that you said something. It wasn't met with a defensiveness. It wasn't met with, well, that's not what I meant. And how could you, it wasn't, which it could have,
Yeah,
know, depending
absolutely.
where you were at in your life, you know what I mean? So I think that I am just trusting, and I love people enough. You know, I love people enough to say, I'm gonna give you an opportunity to say, this what you meant? And if they did, maybe we can have a conversation about it. But if we do not meet of the minds and it's just not, you know, then happily you go your way and happily I'll go mine.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah.
Yeah, I
I don't know
love the
that,
example
but
you used about how you recognized, in that email exchange that you and I had, you were recognizing the way you were feeling, that you were responding with, oh my gosh, like, is this transactional? This is not sounding sincere to me. And I was hoping that it would be. And I think that that's really a good beginning for all of us in our relationships is to really go back to how am I feeling about this right now? Like, what is this kind of feeling surfacing for me that's not not so great. It doesn't feel like I'm connecting, or I feel hurt, or I'm confused, or I'm frustrated, whatever the feeling is that's kind of bubbling up, to really acknowledge that it's there and then somehow work through that in a way that even if we have to, like, set it aside temporarily, like, in the moment, if someone's talking to us, but to be able to commit to ourselves, "I'm gonna go back to that, and I'm gonna investigate and explore what that was about." And then if we really go back into the way that things played out in a conversation or an encounter, and then pinpoint, "You know what? I felt really disrespected right here at this point." Or, "You know what? I think I know why I was really quiet. It's because when this person said this quote to me in a way that it was in a certain tone of voice, I felt really small in that moment." And then we decide, how do I or should I have a conversation with this person about that? And I think that that also determines like the level of the relationship. Is this somebody who's an acquaintance, or is it like you were saying, somebody who's been in your life every day for decades? So that I think also determines what does that other person deserve? If it's someone who's a historical friend of mine and I've known them and we've been close for 30, 40 years, I'm not just not gonna talk to them. I'm gonna go back and say, "Hey, the last time we met, when we had this conversation, I know I got really quiet at a certain point, and I was thinking about that. And when you said this thing, it made I felt very disrespected in that moment. I felt small, and I just wanted you to know that I don't think you meant it that way, but I would like you to know that's how I was feeling and that's why I was reacting that way. And if you want to talk about it, I'm ready to listen." Or something. Like that just came to me out of the blue. It was a total hypothetical. But I do think that there are ways that we can practice this type of communication, and it really can generalize in all of our relationships, whether it is a transactional relationship or it's a marriage or a partnership. Because this is also a technique I'm trying to work on in my marriage, is when I feel activated by something my husband says, to really make sure that I am sticking with what was said and how was it said that triggered this certain emotional reaction in me. And how can I own my own, like take responsibility for the way that I felt, not put that on my husband, but also communicate to him, that hurt my feelings when you said that. I
right.
felt very, very misunderstood or something, whatever it is. So I think this kind of practice of communicating, it becomes more natural the more that we do it. And I think that at first it feels really scary because we're not sure how it's going to be received. But like you were saying, Sherry, when we get to a certain point in our own lives and our own personal growth where we can honor who we are fully and really decide that it's actually a gift that we're giving to ourselves and the other person in the relationship to be honest and to do it in a way that respects both parties. I think that there's really no greater summary of what it means to navigate feelings in friendships and the way that they change than what you said in that part of the segment.
I wanted to ask you this, and I think it's kind of funny because, the whole marriage thing. I mean, me and my husband are communicating on a whole new level because I'm going through the wonderful, change, and so I'm very verbal now. It's like he's like, "What happened to my sweet little quiet look?" And I'm like, she's not so quiet anymore. She just been bubbling under the surface. And so, which was so funny to me because I remember when in our younger years of our marriage, he'd be like, "Honey, you gotta get, gotta speak your mind and da, 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 da." And now I'm speaking it, and he's like, "Wait a minute, could you roll it back a little bit?" I'm learning the balance, okay? Because I can come out like a fire breathing dragon and nobody's safe. So But it's funny because I find with my friends, my husband's friends, they can say things to each other.
Hmm.
a- They they just go at each other. And then they just are laughing and they do not take it personally.
Yeah.
And I'll listen to how they joke and jab at each other. And I'm like, if I ever said that to my one of my girlfriends, she'd come back later or, we take it all in. We take it so deep. And so my husband calls me Oprah, right? He's like, okay, and I just call him, he's the logic brain and I'm the
You're the
heart. Yeah, all the heart. So we're trying to find that balance. Like I know what you're saying in the marriage, but you both have to be wanting that. And it takes a lot of patience because my husband is just a tell it like it is. I say that I married one of the things that I loved about him marrying him was that there's nothing false about him.
Mm.
He is who he is. I thought something was wrong with him. I was like, yeah, I had to put him through the friend zones. Like, you need to check this guy out because he's too happy all the time. Nobody's happy like that, you know? And but he's just, he's happy, I think, because he just is who he is. And if he says something that may have been offensive to someone that he didn't realize, he'll apologize, you
Yeah.
know?
That's
Um,
huge.
yeah, that's a very huge, thing. But I think like what you're saying in marriage and just in friendships, it's having that comfort level to truly be yourself.
Hmm.
And I think our biggest fear, and I don't know, I feel like it's women mostly. Don't come for me, women, if you don't agree. But that we really do take things so personally. Like I said, my husband and his friends can just laugh at each other, but I couldn't say half the stuff that they do to each other to my girlfriends. So I don't know, what do you think about that? You think
With that, Sherry, I think there are differences in the way that men and women relate
communicate?
to each other, like in a same gender kind of dynamic. And my husband said the same thing that you're saying. My husband is the jokester in our marriage. Like he's the one he walks in a room and like everybody turns and, hey Ben, oh, I'm so glad you're here, kind of thing. Um, and I'm the one who's like in the corner with having this one-on-one conversation with someone.
Yeah,
So you're right. There are differences, and I think there are differences in personalities as well. But I also think that you made a really powerful point a couple of minutes ago where you said both people have to be willing to go there in the relationship, to have those conversations and to be willing to sit and listen to the other person and to receive it in a way that the intention has to be, I think, for the relationship, for its growth, for its betterment. And
yeah,
if one person is just not able to do that or they're not willing to do that, then, that's where the other person has to kind of go back and evaluate, okay, where do I go from here? I
yeah,
did make an attempt to talk to this person. I did try to open up and they didn't want to hear it. They shut me down. They were minimizing, whatever, all the different tactics that people use, projecting, defensiveness, manipulation.
yeah,
That's when, it's important for the other person to just kind of decide, all right, well, I did try. And so am I willing to keep trying or am I done? And so
right,
breaking up with a friend is really actually tough to do. But I think that when it goes back to really the theme that you're going back to, Sherry, about honoring ourselves and I think that has to do with personal integrity and self-respect, self-love even. So that's really how where we have to begin and where we have to end is by
right,
our truth and our reality and being able to deliver it in a way that is respectful and kind.
yeah.
Any last thoughts before we say goodbye to our friends?
Well, I saw Eddie, our friend Eddie's on there. He said, "Aren't men always right?" Funny, Ed.
Husband would agree, Eddie.
Yeah, you guys are always right. That's right. But I think the saying is happy wife, happy life. Mm. So, no, I think that I love this conversation. It is so vast,
Yes.
you know, but then at the end of the day, I think it comes back down to just loving yourself, and I think for me, that has probably helped in knowing, you know, how to navigate my friendships, because I'm beginning to love myself enough to have the courage to
Mhm.
speak my truth and not be afraid to lose a friendship. Maybe I'll gain more from it, um, and gain new friendships like I have. Sorry about that. That was my daughter calling.
Oh,
But, have gained new friendships that I wouldn't have opened up to before, like yourself and so many, people that I've met here on Substack, who have become friends that I just know that had I not gone through the hard, difficult things that I had to with, friendships that I've had, um, I just wouldn't have opened up to on a whole other level. And I'm excited. I'm excited about, um, our friendship. I'm excited about the new friendships that I've made, and she keeps calling, so maybe this is where we
right. I am.
relationship with our children could be our next topic.
Could be. I could
Okay.
that. Well, it was
Well,
great
it
to
was great to
and
and it's always great spending time with you, my friend.
thanks
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye, sweet.